The wagon rattled to a stop in front of the courthouse steps in Shafter, Texas, and Sarah Owens knew this was the end of everything she had ever known as a free woman. She clutched her mother's frail hand tighter as the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty street. Margaret Owens wheezed beside her, the old woman's lungs struggling with the dry air and the weight of their circumstances. Around them, curious townspeople gathered, their faces a mix of pity and morbid interest. This was 1878, and while the war had ended more than a decade ago, debt could still make slaves of people in ways the law conveniently overlooked. "Ladies and gentlemen," the banker Mr. Thornton called out, his voice carrying across the square. "As you all know, the Owens family incurred substantial debts following the death of Thomas Owens last winter. The property has been seized, but there remains the matter of ongoing obligations. These two women require placement in households where their labor can settle what is owed." Sarah's cheeks burned with humiliation. 22 years old, and she was being auctioned off like livestock. Worse, her mother, at 63 and in poor health, stood beside her facing the same fate. No one would want an old woman who could barely work. Sarah had begged Mr. Thornton to let her mother go free, promising she would work double to pay both their debts, but he had refused. "The younger one looks strong enough," someone in the crowd murmured. "But who would take the old woman? She looks half dead already." Sarah's jaw tightened. Her mother had worked herself to the bone after father died, trying to keep their small farm going. The drought had destroyed their crops 2 years running, and the debts had piled up like tumbleweeds against a fence. Now they stood here, their last shred of dignity being stripped away in front of half the town. "I will start the bidding for the younger Miss Owens," Mr. Thornton announced. "She is healthy, can read and write, and has experience in household management, cooking, and farm work. 3 years of labor to settle her portion of the debt." $50, called out Mrs. Henderson, the doctor's wife. She was known for working her help hard and paying little. $60, countered Mr. Briggs, who owned the general store. His wife had died the previous spring, and the leer on his face made Sarah's skin crawl. The bidding continued while Sarah stood frozen, her mother swaying slightly beside her. She wrapped an arm around Margaret's waist, supporting her weight. How could they be separated? Her mother needed constant care, needed her medicine twice daily, needed help with nearly everything. Whoever took Sarah would get a good worker, but who would take her mother? As for the older Mrs. Owens, Mr. Thornton began, his voice notably less enthusiastic. "She requires 1 year of care to settle her portion. She is experienced in sewing and light household tasks." Silence fell over the crowd. Sarah's heart sank. Light household tasks were all her mother could manage, and even those were becoming difficult. Her mother's breathing had grown worse over the winter, and she needed help standing some mornings. "Anyone?" Mr. Thornton looked around. "The debt must be settled, folks." More silence. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. What would happen if no one bid? Would they send her mother to the poorhouse? Those places were death sentences. "I will take both of them." The voice came from the back of the crowd, deep and steady. People turned, and Sarah strained to see who had spoken. A tall man stepped forward, his hat tilted low over his face. He wore dusty riding clothes and had the weathered look of someone who spent his life outdoors. As he climbed the courthouse steps, Sarah got her first clear look at him. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 27 or 28, with dark hair that needed cutting and sharp gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His jaw was strong, shadowed with several days' growth of beard, and there was something both gentle and determined in his expression. "I am sorry, Mr. Vance, but this is not how the auction works," Mr. Thornton said stiffly. "Each woman must be bid on separately." "Then I bid whatever is necessary for both," the man replied. His voice carried a hint of an accent Sarah could not quite place. "What is the total debt?" Mr. Thornton sputtered. "That would be $230 for both contracts." "But, sir, the older woman cannot possibly be worth—" "I did not ask for your assessment of her worth." The gray eyes had gone cold. "I asked for the total. $230, you said." "Well, yes, but I will pay $300 in gold right now." The man reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a leather pouch. "On the condition that both women come with me together, and that the contracts specify fair treatment and proper care." A murmur ran through the crowd. $300 in gold was a small fortune. Sarah stared at this stranger, this Mr. Vance, trying to understand. Why would anyone pay so much? What did he want from them? Mr. Thornton's eyes gleamed with greed despite his confusion. "That is most generous, Mr. Vance. Most generous indeed. However, I must ask, do you have the means to care for 2 additional people? The bank must be assured. I own the Double V Ranch, 15 miles north of here. 10,000 acres, 500 head of cattle, 2 dozen horses. I have a house, a foreman, and 6 ranch hands. I assure you, Mr. Thornton, I can provide for 2 women." There was an edge of impatience in his voice now. Sarah's mind reeled. She had heard of the Double V Ranch. Everyone in Shafter had. It was one of the most successful spreads in West Texas, though the owner was apparently something of a recluse. No one seemed to know much about him. "Very well," Mr. Thornton said, practically salivating now. "Let us go inside and draw up the papers. No separation." Sarah heard herself ask, her voice rough from thirst and fear. "You promise my mother stays with me?" Yates Vance turned those gray eyes on her, and she saw something flicker in them. Sympathy, understanding. "You have my word, Miss Owens. Both of you will have a home at the Double V for as long as you need it." "Forever, you said," Margaret whispered, speaking for the first time. Her voice was thin but clear. "You said you would take care of both of us forever." Had he said that? Sarah tried to remember his exact words, but everything was happening so fast. Yates looked at the old woman and his expression softened. "Yes, madam. Forever, if that is what you need. I do not go back on my word." 20 minutes later, Sarah sat in the banker's office while papers were signed and gold coins changed hands. Her mother dozed in a chair beside her, exhausted from standing in the heat. Sarah read every word of the contract carefully, expecting some trap, some hidden clause that would make their situation even worse. But the terms were straightforward and, surprisingly, generous. 3 years of household work for Sarah, 1 year of light duties for her mother, in exchange for room, board, clothing, and medical care as needed. At the end of the contracted time, they would be free of all debt. There was even a clause about fair treatment and adequate rest. Why? Sarah asked Yates Vance as he waited for the ink to dry on the documents. "Why pay so much for us? You could have hired a dozen workers for that amount." He was quiet for a moment, turning his hat in his hands. "My mother died 3 years ago," he finally said. "She was sick for a long time, and I cared for her myself at the ranch. Watching your mother stand up there today, watching people ignore her like she was not even human anymore just because she is old and tired." He shook his head. "I could not let that happen. No one should be discarded like that." Something in Sarah's chest loosened slightly. She was still frightened, still uncertain about what lay ahead, but at least this man seemed to have some decency. "And me?" she asked. "What do you want from me?" "Honest work for honest pay," he replied, meeting her gaze directly. "I need someone to manage the household. My foreman's wife used to do it, but they moved to California last month. The ranch house is large, and 6 cowboys make a lot of mess and eat a lot of food." I need cooking, cleaning, laundry, mending, just regular work, nothing more." The way he said, "nothing more," with such emphasis told Sarah he understood her unspoken fears. Relief washed over her. "I can do all of that," she said. "I am a good worker, Mr. Vance. You will not regret this." "I am sure I will not." He signed the last paper and stood. "We should leave soon. It is 3 hours' ride to the ranch, and I would like to arrive before dark. Can your mother manage in a wagon?" "Yes, if she can lie down. The jostling is hard on her, but she will be all right. I have a spring wagon with a padded bed in back. I came prepared to bring supplies home, but your mother can rest there instead." He glanced at Margaret, who was still dozing. "Does she take any medicine?" "Tincture of lobelia for her breathing twice a day, but we ran out a week ago. We could not afford more." Yates walked to the door and called for someone. A young man appeared, and Yates handed him some coins. "Go to the doctor and get a bottle of lobelia tincture, the largest bottle he has. Meet us at the wagon." The young man nodded and hurried off. Yates turned back to Sarah. "Anything else your mother needs? Any other medicines or supplies?" Sarah felt tears threaten again, but this time from gratitude rather than fear. "No, just that. Thank you." "Do not thank me yet. You have not seen how messy 6 cowboys can be." There was the slightest hint of humor in his voice, and Sarah found herself almost smiling despite everything. They collected Margaret, who woke confused and frightened until Sarah explained what had happened. The old woman studied Yates with cloudy blue eyes. "You are a good man," she pronounced. "I can always tell. You have your mother's eyes." Something flickered across Yates's face, gone too quickly for Sarah to read. "I hope so, madam. She was the best person I ever knew." The wagon was indeed well padded, and they settled Margaret in the back with blankets and a pillow. The young man returned with the medicine, and Sarah immediately gave her mother a dose. Yates helped them both up, his hands gentle but impersonal, and then they were moving through the streets of Shafter toward the open country beyond. Sarah sat on the bench beside Yates, hyper-aware of his presence. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and tall, but he handled the reins with a light touch. He did not try to make conversation, for which she was grateful. Her mind was too full, her emotions too raw. The landscape rolled past, all brown grass and scattered mesquite trees. The Chinati Mountains rose in the distance, purple against the evening sky. Despite everything, Sarah felt a small spark of hope. They were together, she and her mother. They had shelter and work. It could have been so much worse. "Tell me about the ranch," she said after a while, needing to break the silence. "How many people live there?" "Right now, just 6 ranch hands and a young boy who helps with the horses. 7, counting me. 8 and 9 now with you and your mother. The bunkhouse sleeps the men. The main house has 4 bedrooms, a kitchen, a dining room, and a parlor. It was built by the previous owner, a man named Canton, who went back east during the war. I bought the place 5 years ago." "Where did you come from?" Sarah asked, curious now. "Your accent is not Texan." "Virginia, originally. My father was a horse breeder. I learned ranching there, but after the war there was not much left. I came west to start over." His voice was carefully neutral, and Sarah sensed pain beneath the words. "The war took a lot from everyone," she said softly. "My father fought for the Confederacy. He came home different, my mother always said, quieter, sadder. It changed everyone who lived through it." Yates glanced at her briefly. "Your father died last winter," Mr. Thornton said. "Yes." "A fall from a horse. He broke his neck. It was quick, at least. He did not suffer." Sarah swallowed hard. Even after nearly a year, talking about it hurt. "The debts came after. We thought we could manage, but the drought killed our crops, and then my mother got sick and everything just fell apart." "I am sorry." The words were simple but sincere. They rode in silence after that, the only sounds the creaking of the wagon and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Sarah checked on her mother every few minutes, but Margaret slept peacefully, her breathing easier now with the medicine. As darkness began to fall, lights appeared in the distance. "That is the ranch," Yates said, pointing. "Home." The word caught Sarah off guard. Home. She had lost her home today, lost everything familiar. Could this strange place really become home? The ranch house was larger than Sarah expected, a solid two-story structure built of adobe and wood. Light glowed in the windows, warm and welcoming. Several outbuildings surrounded it, including a large barn and what must be the bunkhouse. As they pulled up, a man emerged from the barn, lantern in hand. "Boss, you are back late," the man called. He was older, maybe 50, with a grizzled beard and a pronounced limp. "Wondered if you were staying in town tonight. Had some business to settle." Yates set the brake and jumped down. "Joe, this is Miss Sarah Owens and her mother, Mrs. Margaret Owens. They will be living here now. Miss Sarah is taking over the household management." Joe's weathered face showed surprise but no judgment. "Madam," he said, nodding to Sarah. "Welcome to the Double V." "Thank you." Sarah climbed down, then hurried to help her mother. Yates was already there, lifting Margaret from the wagon bed as gently as if she were made of glass. "Let us get her inside and settled," he said. "Joe, can you stable the horse?" "Sure thing, boss." The interior of the house was clean but clearly lacked a woman's touch. The furniture was good quality but arranged without much thought to comfort or style. Yates carried Margaret upstairs to a bedroom that had obviously been prepared in advance. The bed was made with clean linens, and there was even a pitcher of fresh water on the nightstand. "This was my mother's room," Yates said quietly, settling Margaret on the bed. "I thought she might be comfortable here." Sarah looked around, taking in the lace curtains, the faded but beautiful quilt, the small rocking chair in the corner. This was a room that had been loved. "Are you sure?" she asked. "This seems very personal." "My mother would have wanted it used. She hated seeing things go to waste." He straightened, looking suddenly uncomfortable. "Your room is next door. There is a connecting door if your mother needs you in the night. Let me show you." The second bedroom was smaller but equally clean, with a simple bed, dresser, and washstand. A window looked out over the ranch yard and the dark landscape beyond. Sarah set down the small bundle that contained all her remaining possessions, everything they had been allowed to take from their farm. It was not much. A change of clothes each, a few personal items, her mother's wedding ring. "I will let you both rest tonight," Yates said. "Tomorrow I will show you the kitchen and pantry, introduce you to the men. They are rough but decent. They will not bother you, I will make that very clear." "Thank you, Mr. Vance." Sarah met his eyes, trying to convey everything she felt. Gratitude, relief, lingering fear, confusion about why he had done this. "For everything. I know you said not to thank you, but I must. What you did today, paying so much, keeping us together. Most people would not have done that. Most people should." His expression softened slightly. "Get some rest, Miss Owens. We will talk more in the morning." After he left, Sarah helped her mother into a nightgown and made sure she took another dose of medicine. Margaret was more alert now, looking around the room with wonder. "This is beautiful," she whispered. "It feels like a real home." "It is not ours, Mama. We have to remember that. We are here to work, to pay off the debt." "That young man did not look at you like you were a debt to be paid." Margaret's eyes, cloudy as they were, still saw much. "He looked at you like you were a person he wanted to protect." "Do not start getting ideas," Sarah said firmly, though her cheeks warmed. "He is our employer, nothing more. He did a kind thing today, but that does not mean anything beyond kindness." "If you say so, dear." Margaret's smile was knowing. "But I saw what I saw." Sarah kissed her mother's forehead and retreated to her own room. She changed into her nightgown and climbed into the bed, which was more comfortable than anything she had slept on in months. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the black sky, more stars than seemed possible. What had she gotten them into? This Yates Vance seemed honorable, but she knew how quickly men's natures could change. She would have to be careful, watchful. At the same time, she could not help but remember the gentleness in his hands as he lifted her mother, the coldness in his voice when he told the banker not to assess her mother's worth. There had been real anger there, real compassion. She fell asleep still wondering, and dreamed of gray eyes and strong hands and a voice saying, "Forever." Morning came early. Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of men's voices in the yard below. She dressed quickly in her one good work dress, pinned up her brown hair and checked on her mother. Margaret was awake but tired, her breathing labored. "Rest today, Mama," Sarah said, bringing her water and medicine. "I will come check on you in a little while." Downstairs, she found the kitchen and stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. It was a disaster. Dirty dishes were piled in the sink and on every available surface. The stove was cold. The floor needed sweeping. Clearly, the men had been fending for themselves and doing a poor job of it. "It is worse than it looks," said a voice behind her. Sarah turned to find Yates standing there, 2 empty coffee cups in his hands. In the morning light, she could see him more clearly than she had the day before. He was handsome in a rough, weathered way, with those striking gray eyes and strong features. He looked tired, like he had not slept well. "Actually, it is about as bad as it looks," she replied, and was rewarded with a slight smile. "Fair enough." The men ate cold beans for breakfast because no one could figure out how to work the stove properly. Joe tried, but he is better with horses than cooking fires. Sarah rolled up her sleeves. "Then I had better get started. Is there food in the pantry?" "Yes, plenty. I stocked up yesterday in town. Coffee, flour, bacon, beans, cornmeal, potatoes, onions, dried fruit, canned goods. Whatever else you need, make a list and we will get it." "All right." Sarah surveyed the mess again, formulating a plan. "I will need hot water. Can someone fill the reservoir on the stove?" "I will do it." Yates set down the cups and headed outside. Through the window, Sarah watched him work the pump, filling bucket after bucket and hauling them inside. He did not seem to think it beneath him, this wealthy rancher doing menial work. She found herself reassessing him again. Within an hour, Sarah had the stove going, coffee brewing, and bacon sizzling in a pan. She found eggs in the cold cellar, along with butter and milk that were somehow still fresh. As she cooked, she mentally cataloged what needed to be done. Clean the kitchen thoroughly. Organize the pantry. Do laundry. Mend whatever needed mending. It was overwhelming, but it was also familiar. This was work she understood. The men came in for breakfast looking uncertain, tracking dirt across the floor and removing their hats awkwardly. There were indeed 6 of them, ranging in age from a boy of about 14 to a grizzled man who must be 60. They introduced themselves as Joe, the foreman, Pete, Carlos, Frank, Dutch, and young Tommy. They were polite but wary, clearly unsure how to act around a woman in the house. "Miss Sarah will be managing the household from now on," Yates told them as they sat down at the long dining table. "She and her mother are under my protection. You will treat them with respect at all times. Any man who forgets that will be finding work elsewhere. Understood?" A chorus of "Yes, boss," answered him. Sarah served bacon, eggs, and fresh biscuits she had somehow managed to pull together with the supplies on hand. The men ate like they were starving, shoveling food into their mouths and asking for seconds and thirds. Miss Sarah, this is the best meal we have had in a month, Joe said between bites. We are mighty glad to have you here. Thank you. Sarah poured more coffee, aware of Yates watching her from the head of the table. What time do you usually eat? I need to establish a routine. Breakfast at 5, dinner at noon, supper at 6, Yates said. Can you manage that, or is it too much? I can manage. Sarah had been keeping those hours or earlier all her life. What about laundry day, whenever you want? There is a big tub and washboard in the shed out back. After breakfast, the men headed out to their work, leaving Sarah alone with a mountain of dirty dishes. She was elbow-deep in soapy water when Yates returned. I forgot to mention, he said. There is a Comanche woman named Nayland who comes by twice a week to trade. She brings fresh vegetables, herbs, sometimes venison or rabbit. She is trustworthy, do not be afraid of her. Sarah nodded, scrubbing a plate. Thank you for telling me. How is your mother this morning? Tired. The journey yesterday was hard on her. She needs rest. Let me know if she needs anything. The doctor in Shafter is a competent man. I can fetch him if necessary. You are very kind, Mr. Vance. Sarah looked at him, water dripping from her hands. I am still trying to understand why. He was quiet for a moment. When my mother was dying, I promised her I would not let anger and bitterness make me cruel, that I would help people when I could. Yesterday in Shafter I could help, so I did. It is not more complicated than that. But it was more complicated, Sarah thought. Most people would not have paid $300 in gold on a promise to a dead woman. Most people would not have cared what happened to an old woman and her daughter. Yates Vance was different, and she found herself drawn to that difference even as she reminded herself to be cautious. The days fell into a rhythm. Sarah woke early, cooked breakfast, cleaned, did laundry, mended clothes, cooked dinner, cleaned again, cooked supper, and fell into bed exhausted. It was hard work, harder than she had done even on the farm, but there was satisfaction in it. The house slowly transformed under her care. She organized the pantry, scrubbed the floors until they gleamed, washed all the curtains, and polished the furniture. Yates never commented on these improvements, but she sometimes caught him looking around with an expression that might have been pleasure or might have been sadness. She could not tell which. Her mother remained mostly in her room, still too weak to do much. Sarah brought her meals on a tray and sat with her in the evenings, reading aloud from the few books Yates owned. Margaret seemed content, her breathing easier with regular medicine. She spent her days sewing, mending Yates's shirts with tiny, perfect stitches that showed her years of experience. 2 weeks after their arrival, the Comanche woman Nayland appeared. Sarah was in the kitchen when she heard a knock at the back door and opened it to find a woman of about 40 with long black braids and dark, intelligent eyes. She carried a basket filled with fresh squash, tomatoes, and herbs. You are the new woman, Nayland said without preamble. Her English was good, only slightly accented. Yates said you would be here. Yes, I am Sarah. Would you like to come in? No, I do not stay inside wooden walls if I can help it. Nayland handed over the basket. Vegetables from my garden. You need seeds too? I have good seeds. Yes, please. I would like to start a garden here if Mr. Vance allows it. He will allow. Yates is a good man. He traded fairly with my people when others would not. When soldiers came looking for renegades last year, he told them there were none here, even though my cousin was hiding in his barn with a bullet wound. That is the kind of man Yates Vance is. Sarah's estimation of her employer rose even higher. Sheltering a wounded Comanche would have been dangerous, possibly fatal if the army had found out. He does seem like a good man, she agreed. You take care of him. Nayland's dark eyes seemed to see right through Sarah. He has been alone too long. A man like that needs a woman, needs family. You could be that, you and your mother. "We are just his employees," Sarah said, flustered. "If you say so." Nayland's smile was knowing, much like Margaret's had been. "I come back in 3 days with more vegetables, maybe some meat." After she left, Sarah stood in the kitchen holding the basket and thinking. Was it so obvious, this strange pull she felt toward Yates? She had tried to keep her distance to maintain proper boundaries. They were employer and employee, nothing more. But there were moments when their eyes met across the dinner table, or when their hands brushed as he handed her something, and she felt something spark between them, something that had nothing to do with debt or obligation. She pushed the thoughts away and focused on her work. There was no point in dreaming about impossible things, but the dreams came anyway. At night, lying in her narrow bed, Sarah found herself thinking about Yates more than was proper. She noticed things about him. The way he was always patient with young Tommy, teaching him about ranching with the same care he must have learned from his own father. The way he spoke Spanish fluently with Carlos, and some Comanche with Nayland. The way he worked alongside his men, never asking them to do anything he would not do himself. The way his face softened when he asked about Margaret's health, and sometimes she caught him looking at her in a way that made her breath catch. Not with the predatory interest she had feared, but with something gentler and more confusing. Interest, yes, but also respect, admiration, maybe even longing. A month passed. The heat of July gave way to August and the work continued. Sarah had established herself as an efficient manager of the household. The men's clothes were always clean and mended. The meals were good and plentiful. The house was clean and comfortable. She had even started a small garden behind the kitchen, growing herbs and vegetables from Nayland's seeds. Margaret was improving too. With regular medicine, good food, and a comfortable place to rest, her breathing eased and her strength slowly returned. She could walk around the upstairs now, and sometimes sat in the rocking chair in her room, sewing or looking out the window at the vast Texas landscape. One evening after supper, Yates asked Sarah to join him on the front porch. The men had gone to the bunkhouse, and Margaret was upstairs resting. Sarah sat in one of the chairs, nervous about being alone with him, and looked out at the sunset painting the sky in shades of red and gold. "You have done good work here," Yates said after a while. "Better than I expected, honestly. The house feels like a home now." "Thank you." "That is what I aimed for. The men are happier too. Joe told me the other day that morale is the best it has been in months. That is because of you." Sarah felt herself blushing. "I am just doing the job you hired me for. You are doing much more than that." Yates turned to look at her, and his gray eyes were serious. "Sarah, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Her heart hammered. "All right. Are you happy here? Do you feel safe? Because if you do not, if there is anything I can do to make this better for you and your mother, I want to know." The question surprised her. "Yes," she said slowly. "Yes, I am happy. As happy as I can be given everything that happened, and I do feel safe. You have been nothing but honorable, Mr. Vance. You and all the men, I could not ask for better treatment." Something in his expression relaxed. "Good, I am glad. I worried that maybe you felt trapped here or afraid." "At first, maybe," she admitted, "but not anymore. You have shown me through your actions that you are a man of your word." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the evening. Crickets chirping, a coyote howling in the distance, the soft sounds of the horses in the corral. It was peaceful, and Sarah felt something inside her settle. This was starting to feel like home. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Why did you never marry? A man in your position with a successful ranch, you must have had opportunities." Yates was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he said, "After my mother died, I suppose I threw myself into the work. It was easier than dealing with the grief. And before that, during the war and just after, I was not in a place where I could think about a future with anyone. Too much ugliness, too much loss. By the time I felt human again, I was out here alone, and there are not many women in this part of Texas. You could have gone to town to dances and socials. I could have, he paused. The truth is, I was waiting for something, someone. I just did not know it until recently. The way he said it, the way he looked at her when he said it, made Sarah's breath catch. Mr. Vance, Yates, he interrupted. Please, Mr. Vance was my father. Yates, she corrected, the name feeling strange and intimate on her tongue. I do not think this is proper, this conversation. Probably not. He smiled slightly and it transformed his face. But I have never been very good at proper. Sarah, I am not asking anything of you. I know our situation is complicated. You work for me, you owe a debt. I am not the kind of man who would take advantage of that. But I would be lying if I said I did not feel something when I look at you. I wanted you to know that. Not so you feel obligated to return it, but just so you know. Sarah's mind spun. Part of her wanted to run inside to hide from this conversation and the feelings it stirred up. But another part, a braver part, wanted to stay, to be honest in return. I feel something too, she whispered, but I am afraid. Afraid of what it means, afraid of being wrong about you, afraid of everything. I understand. Yates reached over and took her hand just for a moment, his calloused palm warm against hers. We have time, Sarah. There is no rush. We will let things unfold as they will. He stood then, ending the moment, and Sarah was both relieved and disappointed. She watched him walk back into the house, his tall form silhouetted against the lamplight, and wondered what she was doing. Falling for her employer was foolish, possibly dangerous, but she could not seem to help it. The next morning, everything was different and nothing was different. They were careful around each other, polite and proper, but there was an awareness now that had not been there before. Sarah caught herself watching Yates as he worked, admiring the strength in his arms, the gentleness in his hands with the animals. He caught her looking once, and smiled, and she blushed and turned away. Margaret noticed, of course. You are falling in love with him, she said one afternoon as Sarah sat with her, folding laundry. Mama, do not be ridiculous. It is not ridiculous, it is wonderful. He is a good man, Sarah. A truly good man, they are rare. He is also my employer. We are here because of a debt. Any relationship between us would be built on unequal ground. Then wait until the debt is paid. Margaret's thin hand covered Sarah's. Wait until you are free and clear, and then see what happens. But do not close your heart to the possibility of love just because you are afraid. Were you afraid when you fell in love with Papa, terrified? Margaret smiled at the memory. Your father was wild, reckless. Everyone said he would never settle down. But he loved me and I loved him, and we made it work for 35 years. Not all of them were easy, but I would not trade a single day. Sarah thought about that conversation as summer turned to fall. The work continued, the days grew shorter, and the heat finally broke. Yates taught her to ride, taking her out on a gentle mare named Daisy to show her the ranch. They rode across vast stretches of grassland, through stands of mesquite and along dry creek beds. He showed her where the cattle grazed, where the property lines were, where the best views stretched for miles. On these rides they talked. Really talked. Yates told her about growing up in Virginia, about learning to breed horses from his father, about fighting in the war and the things he had seen that still haunted him. Sarah told him about her childhood, about her father's struggles after the war, about her dreams of maybe teaching school someday if she ever got the education for it. You could do that, Yates said. When the debt is paid, if you want to stay in this area, I could help you get the training you need. There is a normal school in San Antonio. Why would you do that? Sarah asked. Because you are smart and capable, and you should have the chance to be whatever you want to be." He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. They were sitting on a ridge overlooking the ranch, the sun setting behind them, and Sarah felt her heart crack open. This man who had bought her freedom and her mother's care, who treated her with respect and kindness, who wanted to help her achieve her dreams. How could she not love him? "Yates," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." He turned to look at her, those gray eyes intent. "I am listening." "That day on the porch when you said you felt something for me, I did not respond properly. I was afraid, but I want you to know that I—" She took a breath. "I care for you, more than I should, probably. More than is wise given our situation, but I cannot seem to help it. Sarah." His voice was rough. "You do not know how long I have wanted to hear you say that. But we cannot act on it, not yet, not while I am still bound by the contract. I know." He reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "But knowing you feel the same, that is enough for now. We will wait. However long it takes, we will wait until you are free to choose me without any obligation or debt between us." They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, and Sarah felt something settle in her chest. Hope. Real hope, for the first time since her father had died. The months passed. Fall turned to winter, mild by northern standards but cold enough to require fires in the fireplaces and extra blankets on the beds. Margaret continued to improve, well enough now to come downstairs for meals and help with light tasks like peeling potatoes or shelling beans. The men accepted both women as part of the ranch family, treating them with a brotherly affection that made Sarah feel truly at home. Christmas came and Sarah roasted a turkey that Yates had hunted. She made pies and cookies, decorated the house with pine boughs and red ribbons. The men gave her small gifts, awkward but heartfelt. A carved wooden spoon from Joe, a pair of warm gloves from Carlos, a pretty stone from young Tommy. Yates gave her books, 3 beautiful leather-bound volumes of poetry and prose that he had ordered from a catalog. She gave him a shirt she had sewn, with careful stitches and buttons she had traded nail-in for. As winter turned to spring, Sarah realized she had been at the ranch almost a year. 1 year down, 2 to go on her contract. The time had flown by, filled with work and conversation and stolen moments with Yates. They were careful to maintain propriety around the others, but everyone knew. Joe had made a comment once about how the boss was sweeter-tempered these days, and Carlos had laughed and said love would do that to a man. In April, as wildflowers bloomed across the prairie, Yates asked Sarah to ride out with him to check on a herd in the north pasture. They went alone, taking a picnic lunch Sarah had packed. When they reached the herd and verified all was well, they stopped to eat near a small creek lined with cottonwood trees. "Sarah," Yates said as they sat on a blanket in the shade, "I have been thinking." "About what?" "About your contract." "About the debt." He set down his sandwich and turned to face her. "I want to void it, pay it off completely right now, free you and your mother from any obligation." Sarah's heart leaped and sank at the same time. "Why?" "Because I cannot stand the idea that you are here because you have to be, not because you want to be. Because when I ask you to marry me, I want you to say yes or no based on your own free choice, not because you owe me anything. When you ask me to marry you," Sarah's voice came out breathless. "Yes, when, not if. When." Yates took her hands in his. "Sarah Owens, I love you. I have loved you since I saw you standing on those courthouse steps, holding your mother's hand and refusing to let fear break your dignity. I loved you more when I watched you transform my house into a home. I loved you even more when you learned to ride and came with me across this land that I love. I love your strength, your kindness, your sharp mind, your quick laugh. I love everything about you." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "I love you too," she whispered. God help me, I love you so much it frightens me. Then let me pay the debt. Let me free you. And then, if you choose to stay, it will be because you want to, not because you must. Your mother, too. She can stay here as long as she lives as my guest with no obligation whatsoever. You already paid for our freedom once, Sarah said. We cannot ask you to pay again. You are not asking. I am offering. Sarah, I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. My parents left me well off, and the ranch has been profitable. The money means nothing to me compared to you. Please, let me do this. Sarah thought about it, about pride and independence and what it would mean to accept such a gift, but she also thought about her mother's words about not closing her heart to love out of fear. All right, she said, but on one condition. Anything. You do not ask me to marry you until I have been free for at least a month. I need to know, truly know, that I am choosing you without any shadow of obligation. Can you wait that long? Sarah, I would wait forever for you. 1 month is nothing. He pulled her close and kissed her, gentle and sweet, under the cottonwood trees with the sound of water flowing nearby. A week later, Yates rode into Shafter and paid off the remainder of Sarah's contract and Margaret's as well. He brought back the papers marked paid in full and gave them to Sarah in front of her mother and all the ranch hands. You are free, he said. Free to stay, free to go, free to choose your own path. Sarah looked at the papers, at her mother's tearful smile, at the faces of the men who had become her friends, at Yates standing there with his heart in his eyes. I choose to stay, she said. If you will have me as your employee, your partner, whatever you need. I need you as my love, Yates said. Everything else we will figure out together. That month was both the longest and shortest of Sarah's life. She continued to run the household, but now as a paid employee earning fair wages, not as an indentured servant. The difference in how she felt was profound. She was here by choice. Every morning she woke up and chose to be here, chose to do this work, chose to love this man. Yates courted her properly during that month. He took her on picnics. He brought her wildflowers. He read poetry to her in the evenings while Margaret sat nearby smiling and sewing. He was patient and respectful and maddeningly proper, never pushing for more than a chaste kiss or held hands. When the month ended, on a warm evening in late May with the sun setting in glorious shades of pink and orange, Yates asked Sarah to walk with him to the ridge where they had first confessed their feelings. He led her to the top, and then dropped to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. Sarah Owens, I love you more than words can express. You have made my house a home and my life worth living. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? The ring was a simple gold band with a small diamond, beautiful in its simplicity. Sarah looked at him, at the vast Texas landscape spread out before them, and felt her heart overflow. Yes, she said, pulling him to his feet. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Sarah felt like she was flying. This man, this good, kind, wonderful man, was going to be her husband. She had fallen into his life through tragedy and debt, but she was choosing to stay through love. They were married a month later in the parlor of the ranch house, with a minister from Shafter officiating. Margaret wept happy tears throughout the ceremony. Joe and the other ranch hands stood as witnesses, scrubbed clean and dressed in their Sunday best. Nayland came with her husband and children, bringing a beautiful blanket she had woven as a wedding gift. Sarah wore a dress she had sewn herself from beautiful white fabric Yates had bought for her. He wore a new suit, his dark hair finally properly cut, his gray eyes soft with love as he said his vows. I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and stand beside you for all the days of my life, he said. Forever, forever. The word he had used that day in Shafter, the promise he had made to take care of both Sarah and her mother. He had kept that promise, and Sarah knew he would keep this one too. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, Yates gentle with her inexperience, patient and loving. Afterwards, lying in his arms in the bed that was now theirs, Sarah felt a peace she had not known since before her father died. She was home, truly home, life settled into a new rhythm. Sarah was now the lady of the ranch, Yates's wife and partner in all things. She continued to manage the household, but now she also helped with the ranch accounts, learning the business side from Yates. She discovered she had a head for numbers and organization, and together they made the ranch even more profitable. Margaret thrived, her health better than it had been in years. She took over the vegetable garden, coaxing impressive yields from the Texas soil. She made friends with Nayland, the two older women spending hours talking about medicinal herbs and trading recipes. She was happy, content, loved. 2 years after the wedding, Sarah gave birth to their first child, a son they named Thomas after her father. Yates cried when he held his son for the first time, this hard rancher reduced to tears by the miracle of new life. He was a devoted father, patient and loving, teaching his son about horses and cattle, and the land with the same care his own father had shown him. 18 months later, their daughter arrived, a red-faced, loud little girl they named Margaret after Sarah's mother. The older Margaret held her namesake and said it was the greatest gift she could have received. "I have lived to see my daughter happy, married to a good man with children of her own. That is more than I ever dreamed." The ranch prospered. Yates expanded the herd, bought more land, built a new barn. Sarah started a school in Shafter, using part of their profits to hire a real teacher and provide books for the children of ranch families and townspeople alike. It was her dream realized, helping others get the education she had never had the opportunity to receive fully. Joe eventually retired and moved to California to be near his own grandchildren, though he wrote often. Young Tommy grew into a fine cowboy and eventually became the new foreman. Carlos brought his family north from Mexico to live on the ranch. The Double V became known throughout West Texas as a good place to work, where men were treated fairly and paid well. On Sarah's 30th birthday, 8 years after that day in Shafter, Yates threw her a party. Half the county came, filling the ranch house and yard with music and laughter. Margaret, now 71 but still spry, danced with her great-grandchildren, little Thomas and Margaret and the new baby, a second son named Yates Jr. That night, after everyone had gone and the children were asleep, Sarah and Yates sat on the porch where they had first confessed their feelings. "Do you ever think about that day?" Sarah asked. "The day you bought my freedom." "All the time," Yates admitted. "It was the best decision I ever made." "What made you do it? Really? I know you said it was because of your promise to your mother, but there had to be more." Yates was quiet for a moment, looking out at the dark landscape. "When I saw you standing there, holding your mother, refusing to be separated from her no matter what, I saw strength. Real strength, not the kind that comes from muscles or money, but the kind that comes from love. And I thought, that is the kind of woman I want in my life. That is the kind of person I want to be around, to learn from, to love, so I took a chance. I am glad you did." Sarah leaned against him, his arm coming around her shoulders. "You saved us that day, Yates. You gave us our lives back." "No, Sarah, you saved me. I was half alive before you came, just going through the motions. You made me whole again." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out, and Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them here. From tragedy and debt to love and family. From being auctioned on courthouse steps to being the mistress of a successful ranch. From despair to joy. Margaret lived another 5 years, long enough to see her great-grandchildren grow and to know that her daughter was truly happy. When she passed peacefully in her sleep at 76, the whole county mourned. She was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch, her grave marked with a beautiful stone Yates had carved with the words "beloved mother and grandmother." Sarah grieved, but there was peace in the grief. Her mother had lived to see her dreams fulfilled, had spent her last years comfortable and loved. That was a gift, one Sarah never forgot. The years continued to roll by. Thomas grew into a fine young man who loved ranching as much as his father. Young Margaret proved to have her grandmother's gift for healing and herbs and talked about becoming a nurse. Yates Jr. was the wild one, always getting into scrapes and adventures, keeping his parents on their toes. More children came, a total of 6 by the time Sarah was 38 and decided her childbearing days were over. The house that had once felt too large was now bursting with life and laughter. Yates built an addition, adding more bedrooms and a larger dining room to accommodate their growing family. The ranch continued to prosper. Yates became known as one of the most successful ranchers in Texas, his methods studied and copied by others. But he never forgot his roots, never forgot that he had once been a boy fleeing the ruins of Virginia with nothing but his horse and his skills. He was generous with those less fortunate, often hiring men others would not give a chance, paying fair wages, and treating everyone with respect. Sarah ran the household with the same efficiency she had brought to it as a young woman of 22. But now she also sat on the school board, organized charitable efforts for families in need, and was known throughout the county as someone you could turn to in times of trouble. She never forgot what it felt like to stand on those courthouse steps, facing an uncertain future. That memory kept her compassionate, kept her fighting for others who faced similar circumstances. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Yates and Sarah renewed their vows in the same parlor where they had first married. Their children stood as witnesses now, along with grandchildren and friends and ranch hands. Yates looked at Sarah, her brown hair now streaked with gray, her face lined with the years but still beautiful to him, and repeated the words he had said 2 decades before. "I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and stand beside you for all the days of my life. Forever. Forever." They had made it, Sarah thought. Against all odds, despite starting from a place of desperation and debt, they had built a life together. A real life, full of love and family and purpose. As they grew older, they watched their children marry and have children of their own. Thomas took over the running of the ranch, showing the same skill and fairness his father had. Margaret became a nurse, just as she had dreamed, and opened a small clinic in Shafter that served the whole county. Yates Jr. surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, settling down with a sweet girl from town, and helping run the school his mother had founded. On their 40th wedding anniversary, Sarah and Yates sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun set over land they had worked together for decades. They were old now, in their 60s, with gray hair and creaking joints and the accumulated wisdom of a life well lived. "Do you have any regrets?" Sarah asked, her hand in his. "Not a single one," Yates replied. "Every choice, every path led me to you. That makes it all worthwhile. Even the hard times, the drought in '83, when we almost lost Thomas to fever, even those, they made us stronger. They taught us what really matters." He squeezed her hand. "You are what matters, Sarah. You and our family, this life we built together. Everything else is just details." Sarah thought about the frightened young woman she had been, standing on those courthouse steps with her mother, facing a future that seemed dark and hopeless. She thought about the cowboy who had stepped forward and said he would take care of them both forever. He had kept that promise and so much more. "I love you, Yates Vance," she said. I have loved you since that first day, though it took me time to admit it, and I will love you until my last breath. And beyond, Yates said, I will find you in the next life and love you there too. They sat together as the stars came out, surrounded by the life they had built. In the house behind them, their children and grandchildren visited, filling the rooms with noise and laughter. In the barn, horses nickered softly. Across the range, cattle grazed on land that had sustained their family for 4 decades. It was not the life Sarah had imagined for herself as a girl. It was so much better, richer, fuller, more joyful than she could have dreamed. And it had all started with a single act of kindness, one man's choice to do the right thing even when no one would have blamed him for walking away. That choice had changed everything. It had saved 2 lives and created countless others. It had built a legacy that would continue for generations. All because one cowboy looked at a woman and her elderly mother on an auction block and said the words that would change all their lives forever. I will take care of both of you. Forever. And he had. Sarah and Yates lived into their 70s, surrounded by family and love until the end. When Yates passed first, peacefully in his sleep after a full day working on the ranch he loved, Sarah grieved but did not break. She had the strength he had always admired, the strength that had first drawn him to her all those years ago. She lived another 3 years, long enough to see her youngest grandchild married, long enough to hold her first great-great-grandchild, long enough to know that the legacy she and Yates had built would continue. When her time came, she slipped away quietly in the room that had once belonged to Yates's mother, surrounded by her children. They buried her next to Yates on the hill overlooking the ranch, their graves side by side with stones that read simply, Sarah Vance, beloved wife and mother, and Yates Vance, beloved husband and father. Below their names a single line, forever. The Double V Ranch continued for generations, each one telling the story of how it began. How a young woman and her elderly mother faced the darkest moment of their lives, and how one good man stepped forward to change their fate. It became a family legend, a reminder of the power of compassion and the unexpected places love can be found. And on warm evenings, when the wind blew just right across the Texas prairie, people said you could still feel their presence. The cowboy and the woman he had saved, still watching over the land and family they had built together, still keeping the promise he had made so long ago, forever.